We're all eating today, ladies and gents. For the first time ever, both actively developed Payday titles are receiving an update simultaneously, meaning whether you're a Payday 2 or 3 fan, there's going to be something worth logging on for. Sidetrack have managed to one-up the Starbreeze guys again by not only adding PUBG-related cosmetics to the game in honour of the Disaster Class collaboration that's ongoing, they've also added a set of relevant crossover weapons, whilst Payday 3's first weapon pack DLC for the best part of 2 years has the chance to revitalise its stale meta state. As stated during my Payday is Changing video, I won't be doing the same kind of regimented update videos on this channel as I used to, instead picking and choosing what I think is significant enough to highlight and worth your time as viewers. This dual update event is the perfect opportunity to test out that format. I'll be starting with the Payday 2 content, so if you're just here to learn about the new releases for Payday 3, please skip to the timestamp on the screen now. For anyone who wants the TLDR, despite the constant barrage of misery that seems to accompany any Payday-related news these days, as we have our first two-way crossover tied to a genuinely appalling rendition of the Payday formula in PUBG, and these brilliant dev blogs, carried by the personality of Andre, are flanked by the news Payday 3 is at risk of getting an L-dance in the big 2026. Editing Kknowley here, they actually address this almost instantly, something that would have taken old Starbreeze 6 months and 500 meetings about meetings to achieve, so I'm really impressed. Anyway, back to the video. This is undoubtedly the best it's felt to be a fan of this franchise since Payday 3's launch week. That might not be a particularly high bar to cross, but it's also not something I considered possible 6 months ago. In the background, if you can sift through the shite, you can see the light coming back into the eyes of this franchise, and I'm enjoying playing both active titles more than I can remember for a very long time. There will be gripes, nothing is a 10 out of 10, but credit where it's due, in the words of the great Jurgen Klopp, they're on the verge of turning doubters into believers once again. But I swear to God, if I see Dallas doing the gritty in June, I am going to fuck. Payday 2 continues its spree of combining actual content drops with a set of patch note fixes you didn't know you needed until now. The headlining releases for May are the PUBG crossover items, which includes the first free firearm the guys have added in the form of the flare gun. This thing is an explosive secondary weapon with exceptional concealment at base 27, actually making it best in slot for that particular utility. With standard ammo, it deals 155 on initial impact, while also applying a burn damage over time effect on all hit. Unlike the Arbiter, which it feels most comparable to given its fairly accurate trajectory, it doesn't leave that fire on the ground, instead functioning more like the incendiary grenade throwable. Whilst that weakens its utility somewhat, its excellent reload speed and ammo pickup rate means it's surprisingly spammable, pivotally one-shotting shields, which is exactly what this sort of utility secondary is designed to do. It falls just short of the 960 damage required to take out heavy swats in one flare, but again that doesn't feel like too much of a loss given the concealment you gain for running it. A genuinely viable, disruptive secondary for builds that need something specialised for taking out shields or crowd controlling groups, which feels much more unique than I expected at first glance, helped by its fun flare sound effects. Hell, it's even decent against snipers with its comparatively low drop-off compared to other weapons in the launcher category. If running it with its standard incendiary ammo isn't for you, it can also be modified into a shotgun-style secondary with buckshot, flechette or slug rounds available. Sadly, the buckshot isn't considered a sting round, meaning it lacks shield penetration, but can still fill a niche as a fairly consistent sniper killer. As for slugs, these do enable you to one-shot the shield still, or take out enemies from behind cover, but with middling accuracy stats and one-in-the-chamber reloads, outside of messing around for the novelty, I don't see a good reason to run this thing with anything other than its standard fiery ammo type. Still, for a free crossover weapon added out of the blue, I've had quite a bit of fun with this thing, probably bringing me more personal joy than the entire PUBG mode, not that that's saying much. Anyway, the crossover doesn't end there, with not one but two new melee options added to that slightly bloated system. The irony is not lost to me that probably PUBG's most iconic weapon had to be reserved for Payday 2, because 3 doesn't have a system to properly support it, but I digress. The fry pan and the olive branch are both identically statted. They're both frying pans, and I'm disgusted they weren't in the game when I was initially doing those TF2 themed runs. In fact, with the flare gun, Pyro could have been also a lot more interesting, so if you squint your eyes at it, feel free to imagine this is a TF2 crossover rather than PUBG. The pans themselves are fine, they swing fast enough to leverage Sociopath, which is always a good sign, actually dealing similar base damage to the best melee in the game, the Katana, with a bonus point of concealment and improved knockdown. Unfortunately, the range and swing speed is somewhat lacking, and with melee options being so black and white in this game in terms of best in slot, I don't see either getting a lot of play despite being fairly solid options. Finally, on the PUBG front, we have a new mask pattern in the form of the reinforced visor. I suppose they couldn't add the mask when we already have the Vlad armor. Still, this has to be the first pattern added to Payday 2 in years, so that's something. That's the bulk of this update covered, although there are some very impactful changes to the Ballerina, the new single-fire SMG from the Espionage DLC, and to one of the game's oldest heists, Firestarter. The Ballerina now gets the 5% damage increase up close of its SMG brethren, in addition to vastly improved ammo pickup, going from 0.4 to 2 to 3 to 5, meaning with decent accuracy it can go ammo positive now even on death sentence. Concealment was also buffed in addition to the damage on the point barrel, meaning this thing hits even harder when it crits or with Berserker active. Previously, it was a viable, although playstyle dependent alternative to your standard SMG secondaries and sniper builds, but now it's a powerful force on its own, fitting into 3 SMG setups, giving it self-sustaining, and actually giving me quite a lot to think about, up next to the likes of the CR8 or Krinkov. With a decent trigger finger, it might even compete for best in slot, making those espionage pack purchases feel much more vindicated, even aside from its incredible utility and stealth additions. As for Firestarter, all of its significant changes come on day 1, where stealth has been totally overhauled. For those unaware, Firestarter stealth was an unintended approach to the heist, which could be achieved with an immense amount of patience and skill, bearing in mind even being spotted was a surefire alarm trigger, thanks to their Mendozas apparently acting as a great fungal hive mind. They've lost the ability to communicate telepathically, meaning Firestarter stealth is no longer a pipe dream reserved for the best stealth players out there. Additionally, the team have added a security room and it's now possible to switch off cams, as well as a body bag asset to further cement this is a possible intended approach. Hell, it even has an added stealth bonus attached now. However, even with all these buffs to the player, it's still no walk in the park. Even if you have an ECM active, if a bullet is ever fired, the cops will be called immediately, meaning you still need to have James Bond-esque accuracy and reaction time to clear out the grouped warehouses. Back in the day, I achieved this legitimately once, and couldn't replicate that feat last night even with all the new advantages, so by no means is it easy now. I do think some players will be disappointed to see one of the game's toughest unofficial challenges somewhat watered down, but in truth, making a fun challenge like this one more official and approachable is likely a good thing. It's a fix to a heist 13 years coming, if you want to look at it that way. I'll be interested to see if this is as polarizing as the sidetrack guys seem to be braced for, but from my perspective, they just fixed a bugged heist and improved it as a viable stealth option. Another heist touch-up was Nightclub, one of my least favourites to challenge run, which will now only spawn standard cams whenever the RNG is rolled for them. This is a positive, as it was previously one of the few genuine stealth fail states you could find yourself in, forced loud without the right tools in your build, which always feels like a shame. I have to admit, this probably impacted me disproportionately thanks to all the odd rule sets I run. Lastly, in terms of noteworthy changes, they've made it so you're less likely to roll masks you already own during the card drop section. This is a solid improvement to allow new players to fill out their collection without running into duplicates, and again shows that finger on the pulse attention to detail Sidetrack are developing a reputation for. I swear every update there's something I'll be kicking myself for not suggesting first, as it just makes too much damn sense. Another excellent update pulled off almost effortlessly by the guys. On Sidetrack, by the way, you're probably bored of me waxing lyrical about their work, but there's one major development in recent weeks that was too slow on the draw to fit into the last Payday 2 video. As of May, Mod Workshop, the primary modding platform of the Payday franchise, is now co-operated by the Sidetrack team. This wasn't a hostile takeover, it's a collaborative effort, but if I can read between the lines, my assumption is that Sidetrack will be taking on much of the operating costs of the site, meaning they've been free to remove ads from it completely, which is already a massive win. I suspect we'll hear more on this development soon, as it's obviously a platform from which better mod support and integration can be built, which could be genuinely astronomical for the game's future success and longevity. Not to mention the potential to support Payday 3 modding, which is currently floundering due in no small part to the comparative difficulty of modding in Unreal. Baby steps, but better mods for Payday 3 could be a game changer on PC. Speaking of Payday 3, it's time to get down to brass tacks with its May update. And whilst this is sometimes an opportunity to take the kid gloves off and go to town on that trademark Starbreeze incompetence, short of a few gripes, much like the smash and grab update last year, this one's actually just very well made. Much like with Payday 2's update, the core of this one is in its new weapon additions, although we're also getting a brand new heist rework for Turbid Station, including a loud approach, an evolution of the overskill mechanic, which is a bit of a one step forward, two steps back situation, and a new set of PUBG themed cosmetics attached to the third consecutive round of contracts. Starting with the new weapons from the Swedish Weapon Pack DLC, which was the main reason I chose to play the early access build in advance, which by the way we are getting again, as I feel when it comes to paid content it's best to be forewarned. Upping the value from the last pack, this one consists of 3 new ballistic weapons in addition to a throwable. The Studsgranat S18 is where I'll start on this one, functioning as a secondary frag grenade option. It scales from the frag tree skills, so keep that in mind when building. For all intents and purposes, it seems like a fairly light-for-light trade, with its primary gimmick being the Bouncing Betty-style upward spring before detonation, which you won't benefit from if you land it directly with sudden impact equipped. From testing, this seems to effectively increase its range and ability to bypass shields, which I assume comes at a damage cost, although it's hard to tell even with numbers on screen, when most things are getting obliterated by the frag build anyway. Where it does have a clear advantage next to standard frags is when tossed around corners, taking just a second longer to detonate whilst it jumps upwards, which allows you to get behind cover and avoid tanking as much self-damage. Quietly, I think this might power creep frags, if just marginally, which isn't a great sign, but if I'm being honest, it's a bit of a toss-up really. You'll hardly feel left behind if you choose to forego the DLC. Moving on to a new weapon that can't be accused of power creep, the Russell JB9 is the game's first secondary SMG, meaning unlike the Tribune, this thing scales with SMG skills. Now, that's a double-edged sword, bearing in mind the handgun skills are quite powerful in comparison, but at least now we can make a coherent SMG build without wasted skills on a secondary. It's the lowest damage SMG in the game at 48, with the highest fire rate at 1.2k RPM. Yes, we do now have stats on the weapon menu at long last. Anyway, this thing is a bullet hose, competing with a number of its primary alternatives in terms of raw DPS, which isn't always the case without serious skill investment. Unfortunately, it does seem to run into ammo issues as a result, and can't really be wielded as a pseudo-primary, needing the support of an ammo-efficient partner to get by. SMGs in general are insanely good against bulldozers now though, as not only can they rapidly strip their armor, they're also able to stun them infinitely with Multitasker, which is something you can pull off on any build with this thing in the secondary slot for just 3 points invested. Something to consider, but not enough alone to make this weapon pack worth the investment. In the primary slot, the only new addition is the Skogskrigaga AG9, or the AK-5. This is a 100 damage 650 fire rate AR with excellent recoil and control stats. It feels relatively powerful, almost like a side grade to the Adelig, and I'd love to tell you how it really fares in terms of shots to kill, but for some reason, despite these detailed weapon stats, they haven't given us literally the most important one in the entire game, penetration, meaning I'm as clueless as you are. A bit of an off-topic point for here in the video, but I'm really unimpressed by the implementation of these weapon stats. It's still incredibly hard to derive meaning from these formless numbers, which literally scale off the bar they've been given, as you can see with the Pursuivant. The standardized 100 scale from Payday 2 would be much more helpful, and that lack of a pen stat on weapons is criminal when you have an entire weapon class built around hitting certain penetration breakpoints. Anyway, one of two moans out of the way, as I was saying, the AK-5 feels extremely solid, I suppose as you'd expect from a rifle of its kind. It's not about to shake up the AR meta anytime soon, but it also won't let you down, which is more than enough for some. Finally, for this DLC pack, we have the big boy of the bundle, the Carl Alfred M606, which is a new overkill weapon, the second paid one since the Sociopath baseball bat, and probably the most impactful addition of the lot. I'll elaborate more on the new overkill perk system shortly, but in brief, this is the weapon that makes the best use of this new innovation by a country mile. It has 3 ammunition options to choose from: the regular rocket, which deals solid AoE damage, but takes 3 whole rockets to deal with a dozer, which is its standard capacity; the heat grenade, which deals massive damage in a straight line in exchange for a tiny blast radius, but can actually one-shot dozers as a result; or the smoke grenade, which applies all your smoke grenade skills, meaning it can assist dodge builds and deal poison damage over time. Or hell, just make Dirty Eyes look like it's been hit by white phosphorus. Whilst this sounds gimmicky, there is a perk called Mutilator, which makes all units, including dozers, deal 50% less damage permanently after being hit by the Carl Alfred, making this a monstrous support option, which we really lack in the overkill weapon slot at the moment. What some might want it for though is as a simple dozer deletion button. These guys can't catch a break this update, but I think a new way to instantly delete them off the map might just take the cake. It basically means you can run any weapon without fear of the dozer as a new I win button. Also note you'll deal surprisingly little self-damage from your own rockets, which makes me think they've learned from the launch piglet. That's everything in the Swedish weapon pack. There's nothing in here that feels like a must-buy, although the Carl Alfred and new grenade undoubtedly bring something new to the table. At the newly set $4 price point, you can do a lot worse with your money. Hell, you could buy the Payday PUBG Battle Pass if you hate yourself, and I suspect this DLC will do reasonably, just given how long it's been since we last saw new weapons, but it's certainly not a mandatory purchase or an absolute metacore. In fact, just like during Boys in Blue, the weapon players are more excited for might not even be in the bundle, as after a year of accidental and intentional teasing, the RPK, or Zoka 17, is finally here. This is a slower firing, higher damage LMG when compared to the Blight Spruter, and generally feels like it handles a post-Skills 2.0 world much better than its fallen kinsman. It's got that same heavy AR feel you'd expect from the weapon, sometimes just functioning like an AK with a larger magazine. In general, I'm not that enamoured with the AR and LMG build at the moment, but the Zorkus has reversed that trend for me somewhat. Maybe it's just the fact that they've been teasing it for months, but finally getting my hands on this thing felt damn good. It's not exactly cutting-edge analysis, which would be difficult anyway with the current state of how they're presenting stats, but it's just got that intangible feel factor which goes a long way. Not to mention, it's free, that always helps the medicine go down. I'm going to stick with the weapon theme for the time being and talk you through the new Overkill weapon system next. The first thing you might notice is that the skill bar and progression element of this has been removed altogether. You don't need to level these weapons up at all to get the most out of them, which is a fine change. Instead, each one has perk slots which can be filled at a cost, with one of the few specific skill options which generally emulate nodes of the old system. Take the Bat for example. This has 3 perk slots, with the first seeing you choose between taking 20% less damage when surrounding or activating the panic effect upon kill. The second node contains the heal on kill effect and stun immunity option, whilst the third perk either allows you to stay in the mode for longer whilst in it by picking up kills, or replenish it faster when not. The idea is that you build the Bat to fit around your playstyle, so if you like going on long rampages with it, you should go Frenzy, Rabid and Bloodlust to maximise uptime, whereas if you're using it more for the healing and utility, you'll run Master of Mayhem, Berserker and Killer Instinct. This sort of works from a role-playing perspective, but it does weaken the Overkill weapons compared to their original overskill design, and I fear will simply lead to players optimising the variety out of the game the way it's currently balanced. Outside of the Carl Alfred, which nails the new playstyle focus, I'm fairly certain there's a best-in-slot option for all other overkills now. What I will say, compared to when I first read these changes on paper, is that you should test them before drawing a strict conclusion. A lot of the base weapon buffs are actually quite impactful. Moving on to the stealth-only Interceptor, it has 2 perk nodes for some reason, allowing you to extend its duration, apply a marking effect, block radios, or create a map-wide distraction. This is a sizable nerf for the only stealth-focused overkill in the game, as it only shuts down cams now at standard. It's an odd one because you might as well still run it for stealth, but was this thing strong enough to demand these kinds of adjustments? I don't really see the value here, especially if they didn't bother giving it a third perk node to compensate. The minigun is next, which has been outperformed by most secondaries in the game prior to the patch, meaning I'm not sure it can afford to get any weaker. Fortunately, buffs to its base kit in terms of spread and damage do really help it out, meaning you actually have a chance to build up its very powerful damage resistance passive once more. However, I do think this is a great example of a weapon with 3 nodes which will almost always be filled by the same perks. I struggle to see why I wouldn't run Kill Momentum for 5% armor resistance per kill, Death Merchant for even more DR, although I have no idea why it's written this way, and Killer Armor to allow that 90% damage resistance to persist for some time after unequipped. Any other combination feels gimmicky, which is where this new system falls apart somewhat for me. Oh, and as I alluded to earlier, dozers are now a joke to many weapons in the game, particularly those good at stunning cops. Shotguns will stun lock them, as if that matchup wasn't already in their favour, SMGs can knock them off buildings with its multitasker stagger effect, and the minigun quite literally pin them against walls now. It's still not back to its release glory, but this thing finally has some value once more. The HET5 Red Fox is a bit of an odd one because, again, I get that it has 2 playstyles, one with the mark effect, the ability to shoot cops through as many as 13 walls, meaning you should be able to always counter-snipe from absolute safety, and another that prioritises damage, allowing you to one-shot the dozer's visor or 3-shot to the body once more. Of course, this is a nice buff to the Red Fox, but remember, they just added a rocket launcher that does its job 3 times better, so I doubt it'll see as much use as before. Also, this is a perfect example of horrible per node balancing. I mean, who would be willing to trade the graze effect on their Red Fox for the niche ability to mark cops only whilst aiming down sights at them? I simply don't see the relative value here, which is a real blot on this revised system. Moving on to the Markham Mamba, this has eternally been the laughingstock of overkill weapons, even before the game was released. Now it's actually pretty decent, despite only having 2 perks to choose from. They try to give it a dozer killing utility in a Wrecker, allowing you to strip 30% of plates off enemies with direct hits, but you have to trade out the cluster nades, which is a horrible trade in my opinion. Especially when they just added a weapon that always one-shots them. What's the point trying to make a weapon that's 3 or 4 times worse at the same thing? Instead, as they built in the explosive damage immunity to the weapon as standard and increased its damage and range, you're much better off going with the cluster bomb and shockwave combination to make this thing as deadly as possible to crowds, actually being the most effective crowd clearer in the game, even above the likes of the Red Fox and Carl Alfred. It's not as useful and niche as dozer deleting, but boy does it need something, and I'm happy that even when the perks don't feel perfectly implemented, at least the base design of the Piglet got an upgrade. Finally, as I've already discussed, the Carl Alfred is the poster child for how this system should work for all weapons, coming with 3 distinct forms and supported by perk nodes which lean into each style, either increasing your ammo capacity, reload speed, or applying powerful debuffs to enemies hit. Obviously, if you're running it to instantly kill, you should prioritize blast radius and capacity, but if you want utility, go with the debuffs. All 3 variations work pretty nicely, and should be the blueprint moving forward if they intend to iterate on this. Imagine an incendiary Piglet to control an area, or an explosive ammo Red Fox which is designed to specifically deal with groups of cops from range. That feels like a logical endpoint for this system, they just haven't quite got there in the first iteration. Turbid Station also got a complete remake with similar visual upgrades to No Rest, giving it improved vibrancy in all areas. Stealth was also touched up, forcing us to mask up from the start, but in exchange making 90% of the heist private rather than secure, which means pivotally we can now sprint everywhere around the train carts, which is really where this heist shines, with traversal options being the #1 improvement from Payday 2's Murky Station. Now it leans into its strengths as more of a parkour-driven stealth experience, without sprinting drawing the attention of every cop on the map. Additionally, a bit like Firestarter Day 1 in Payday 2, it received a new security room, meaning cams aren't permanent anymore, and a few of the more frustrating objectives have been touched up. Not to mention with some of the new assets, you can start with the trains already open, meaning you can avoid the most frustratingly risky objective set in the entire heist. Of course, as much as the stealth tweaks are a massive improvement, they pale in relevance to the fact that this heist is now fully functional in Loud once you mess up. This is a symptom of Turbid being the least played heist in the game, and Starbreeze looking for a way to make better use of the real estate. The Loud approach is a bit of a mixed bag in my opinion, at times feeling like a mod rather than an official heist. The actual objectives are not all that interesting in Loud, mostly still just requiring hacks to enter the train carts, and the portion of that variation this heist is known for is somewhat lost when you go with this approach. However, as an arena for a Loud heist, it's been really well crafted. That fun to traverse layout works just as well here, and the chopper escape is surprisingly cinematic, with cops chasing you down the train tracks. Spawns have also been really well done, both up on the tracks and down in the basement, with a surprising variety of entrance points, rappelling from the bridge above, pushing through new gaps in the fences surrounding the docks, or breaching through elevators down below. Combat itself is much better suited to this heist than first appears, even if the overall experience is fairly uninspired. I don't see this jumping to the top of anyone's tier list as a result, but it's also undoubtedly going to see more play than before, if just by virtue of its vastly improved stealth experience. Watch out for the few lingering bugs though. I noticed assault waves would just abruptly start and end without much warning, and the level geometry has a few locations where AI can get stuck, becoming a bit of a liability. Not the perfect execution No Rest remake was, but still a valiant attempt at remastering the remake. Finally, in terms of really major additions, as mentioned we have 4 new contracts to work through to unlock the PUBG items. These are all fine iterations. Obviously I don't have all that much of a tie to the franchise, but as cosmetic collabs go, this one fits the Payday universe fairly well. The actual challenges to unlock them, not so much. Some of these are even more egregious than what they had us doing in the past. Dropping microcams over and over and marking security is one thing, making us sprint back and forth through doors, that's diabolical contract design. I know these are probably just intended to be unlocked passively over time, but that's not how players generally interact with these sorts of challenges. Oh, and the slide distance contract is totally bugged, as there's no way I'm sliding over 100 meters at a time. Contracts have so much potential and their rewards have been consistently great, but I just don't enjoy the random hoops they have us jumping through. A relatively minor gripe though for what is a surprisingly jam-packed update. What a time to be a Payday fan. I thought we'd never see days like these again. Simultaneous update releases for both games with more than enough content to be worth logging on for. Keep your optimism tempered, we're not out the woods yet, and to be frank, the cost of Q1 was massive for Starbreeze. Financially, recent decisions have not put the Starbreeze balance sheet in the best of spots, but this is the cost of winning back goodwill. They need to bite the bullet on solid free content, supported by seldom quality paid releases, if they're ever going to win back a viable audience. I just hope this is sustainable for the studio moving forward. That said, thank you so much for watching. It's a pleasure actually covering both games to their fullest. Happy update day, it's a big one. I'll see you all later for the usual update day stream. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.